It's Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs Co with you until 7 o'clock tonight. So alongside me, my panel, a new face we like those, don't we? Nick Freeman, the lawyer and commentator, and Andy Williams, the political commentator. Welcome back, Andy. You're very welcome. You're very welcome as well.
Thank you very much.
I found you fascinating, Nick, because whilst I introduce you by your name, many people will know you potentially as Mr. Loophole, because you were a very, very top lawyer. If I ever got done for speeding, which obviously, ladies and gents, I wouldn't. I don't speed. I'm a very sensible driver.
Or going through red lights.
All going through red. I did actually get. I let him into that secret. I did actually get done accidentally for that the other day. I thought it was Amber, but anyway, that's a whole different story. You defended the likes of David Beckham, Alex Ferguson, Wayne Rooney. Like, the list is endless, isn't it?
There is a long list, yeah.
And I found you quite interesting. I saw a clip of yours, a quote of yours, where someone had said to you, "What do you feel about using loopholes? Do you feel bad?" And you'd said something like, "Morally, no." What did you say? Something like morally not great, but ethically fine, or something like that?
Well, it's the law. So the loopholes are the law. So if they haven't followed the correct procedure, am I to say to the prosecution, look, actually, you've made this mistake or that mistake? I don't make the law. So they have to do it correctly. And if they don't, that can be fatal to the case. So you could have a drink driving reading, a really high one, but if the police haven't read out the statutory warning, the court doesn't have a discretion, shall we admit it or not. It's mandatory. The case gets thrown out. And these procedures are largely cast in stone. So they're there, put in place by our democratically elected parliament. And when they're not complied with, I
hold their feet to the fire. Well, ladies and gents, there you go. Don't advocate, obviously, speeding. Definitely not. That would be an awful thing to do. But if you ever were to be found yourself in those kind of predicaments, I just find that history very interesting. Anyway, look, join the conversation all the usual ways tonight. I'm going to get bombarded now with speeding questions and stuff like that, I reckon. Anyway, join the conversation. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay. Of course, you can tweet, you can X me. That last story, Prince Harry, in the bulletins there. I like some of you guys at home. You're very smart. David says, Michelle, you were just asking about Birmingham, saying, should the army get called in to clean the streets? He's put a proposal there, not the army. You should be taking labour from the prisons and getting those guys to clean the streets in Birmingham. That's a very interesting suggestion. We'll explore all of that and more towards the end of the programme. But for now, Caroline Levitt, I quite like her. She's the White House press secretary. She's the one, she takes no messing around whatsoever, does she, when it comes to press questioning. She'll be on her feet in a few minutes, so I'll have a little bit of a listen to what she's saying. But, of course, the world is still driving themselves mad, aren't they, into the pits of despair in some cases about Donald Trump and his antics. He's not having any of it. He's not slowing down. He's actually defending his actions and all the things that he's doing, and so on. Nick, where are you on this?
Well, I think we're trying to discover where he is on it. Is this a ploy? Is this brinkmanship, or does he actually mean it? And we don't know. So I think at the moment it's a time for really cool heads. We need to remain calm.
You sound like Keir Starmer.
Hopefully not.
That's what he's saying.
No, I think in this respect he's right, but we don't want platitudes like, we've got your backs. We need action. So what we need is, this is an opportunity to grow the economy, in my view, reduce taxation, get cracking with things now, strengthen trade relations with other countries, because we might be in a situation where we can no longer trade with America. Hopefully not. No. There is a special relationship. We have at the moment a favourable deal. I think it's important to remember that. And I think if it's handled correctly, for example, Trump loves Scotland. His mother was Scottish. Why doesn't Keir Starmer have a chat and say, look, why don't we get the Open at Turnberry? Wouldn't there you go. You're an interesting man, but you're not as interesting as the White House press secretary, I'm afraid, in this moment. Caroline Levitt, let's go.
Administration. On April 17th, President Trump will welcome Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Italy for an official working visit at the White House as well. The president's thoughts also remain with the families and communities experiencing devastating loss from the severe storms and flooding affected several states across the central U.S. President Trump approved emergency declarations for Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee, allowing FEMA to provide federal assistance like equipment and resources to support state and local emergency response officials who are leading this response on the ground. Last night, the Supreme Court delivered a massive legal victory to the Trump administration and allowed us to continue removing foreign terrorist invaders under the Alien Enemies Act. This was a smackdown to a rogue left-wing, low-level district court judge who have relentlessly tried to stop President Trump from using his core constitutional powers as head of the executive branch and as commander-in-chief. The highest court in the land made it clear that the President of the United States has the power to protect our homeland and forcibly remove foreign terrorists who pose a grave threat to families and communities. Thank you to the Supreme Court for upholding the rule of law and protecting the Constitution. Our message to the monster Tren de Aragua and MS-13 terrorists still hiding illegally inside our country is clear. Deport yourself now, or you will be locked up and sent back to your home country. On another matter, the historic Liberation Day announcement last week by President Trump made it very clear that the era of American economic surrender is over. President Trump is no longer going to allow American workers and companies to be ripped off at the hands of foolish trade practices that shipped away millions of high-paying jobs and hollowed out communities across the country. It's America first, all the way. And despite fear-mongering by the media, the world is clearly responding to President Trump's approach. Just yesterday, President Trump held a bilateral meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here at the White House. The Prime Minister pledged to immediately eliminate America's trade deficit with Israel and remove their trade barriers. Israel's proactive approach should serve as a model for the rest of the world. Also yesterday, the President spoke with Japan's Prime Minister, who wants to negotiate as well. The President also spoke to the acting President of South Korea this morning. He has tasked Secretary Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer to lead these talks. In total, since the Liberation Day announcement, nearly 70 countries have already reached out to the President to begin a negotiation. Countries are falling over themselves to reform their unfair trade practices and free open their markets to our country. Why? Because these countries greatly respect President Trump and the sheer power of the American market. These countries realize they've gotten filthy rich over the past few decades by imposing substantial tariffs on American-made products and ridiculous non-monetary barriers to block out American industry. The jig is up. Past American presidents sat by and let this happen, but President Trump stood up for our country, and he is saying no more. The President's message has been simple and consistent from the beginning. To countries around the world, bring us your best offers, and he will listen. Deals will only be made if they benefit American workers and address our nation's crippling trade deficits. America does not need other countries as much as other countries need us, and President Trump knows this. He's going to use the leverage of our markets and our country to the advantage of the people he was sworn in to represent. On the other hand, countries like China, who have chosen to retaliate and try to double down on their mistreatment of American workers, are making a mistake. President Trump has a spine of steel, and he will not break, and America will not break under his leadership. He is guided by a firm belief that America must be able to produce essential goods for our own people and export them to the rest of the world. A strong America cannot be solely dependent on foreign countries for our food, medicines, and critical minerals. And America must always maintain a robust defense supply chain. Reprioritizing and strengthening our manufacturing industry are essential national and economic security issues of the utmost importance to President Trump. By focusing on supercharging the onshoring of American manufacturing, the President is already delivering on his promise to usher in an economic golden age for our country. Just look at Friday's jobs report, which smashed expectations for the second straight month. The American economy added 228,000 jobs, nearly 100,000 more jobs than economists predicted, and the fourth highest month for private payroll growth in the past 2 years. There was also a sharp increase in transportation, construction, and warehousing employment. And in just 11 weeks, President Trump has secured more than $1.5 trillion in private sector investment. This is $500 billion more than Joe Biden secured in his entire term. This record-breaking private sector investment will create roughly 350,000 American jobs and counting. If you add up all of the investment pledges from foreign governments, President Trump has secured an incredible $5 trillion in total investments already. In the months ahead, President Trump's pro-growth economic agenda will be fully realized. The largest deregulatory effort in American history is underway. Unnecessary, burdensome, costly red tape is being eliminated by this entire federal government every day, driving down costs and massively boosting small businesses. So far, President Trump's deregulation effort has already saved Americans more than $180 billion, equivalent to $2,100 per family of 4. The president's drill baby drill energy agenda, which he will discuss later this evening in the East Room, is capitalizing on the abundance of natural resources under our feet to generate more affordable electricity, cheap gas, and quality new jobs. All of this will combine to end the Biden-imposed cost of living crisis that's absolutely crushed American families. Under President Trump, the American energy industry will lead the globe over the next century, delivering lower prices and significantly strengthening our country's economic position. At the president's direction, Republicans in Congress are working quickly to pass one big, beautiful bill, which will also include the largest tax cut in American history. As President Trump has said, the House must pass this budget resolution quickly. Here in our new media seat today, we have Jasmine Wright, the White House reporter for Notice. Notice is a nonprofit and nonpartisan news site which launched in early 2024. They've gained millions of readers across the country since. The newsroom's goal is both to inform readers and train the next generation of politics and policy journalists. They also partner with state newsrooms and to give local communities more knowledge of what their representatives are doing in Washington, D.C. With that, please kick us off, Jasmine.
Thanks so much, Caroline. A couple questions for you. The first one being, can you explain the White House's evolution from this is not a negotiation on tariffs to countries should pitch us and start negotiations on tariffs?
As the president said yesterday, Jasmine, both things can be true at the same time. And it is a non-negotiable position that the United States has faced a national security and economic crisis.
Well, there you go. That was the White House press secretary there, Caroline Leavitt, giving her regular updates. I've got to say, I do like to dip in and see what she's saying. I think she's very, very articulate. You know, she's only 27 years old, that girl, you know. I think she's absolutely fascinating to listen to. Doesn't take any messing around whatsoever from the media. She was saying there, one of the points that she was making is saying that ultimately the media is creating a little bit of a storm here. Long story short, what I got from that point there, she's basically saying that Trump stands by what he's doing. 70-odd countries apparently trying to get in touch and negotiate. I'll come to Nick in a second about that, because the other thing I thought was really interesting was about this, we're just talking about legal loopholes, the legal loopholes now that currently are allowed to stand when it comes to deporting these suspected gang members. Did you hear that line where she was saying, we would tell these terrorists, deport yourselves now or you will be locked up? I can hear many of you cheering from your sofas at home, and the envy actually wishing that we had people with attitudes like that in this country to wrongdoers. But anyway, Andy, your thoughts on some of that? It's not backing down.
No, I mean, it's a pretty breathless rundown of whatever you think of it, a huge amount of action taken in a very short period of time. I mean, Donald Trump is nothing if not decisive, but he also is completely unpredictable. And I don't think can be trusted. You know, one of the things you hear said often about Donald Trump is, oh, we should take him seriously, not literally. It's something that Nigel Farage has been saying a lot. Yeah. You've heard it from many people. I actually think it's time we do start taking Donald Trump literally, because he has a track record of saying he's going to do something pretty crazy and going ahead and doing it, and to hell with the consequences. You know, I don't think, if you ask any serious economists in the world, nobody thinks this is a good idea. I think this is a reckless experiment built on a false premise, which is that there are tariffs being imposed by countries like Britain of 10% that are flat, which is just not true. We don't impose 10% tariff on goods.
That's not what he said. America. He's not saying his little piece of paper, that little chart thing, it made very clear that it wasn't just like-for-like tariffs. It was including things like trade barriers and restrictions and things that the Americans would say, have hindered free and fair trade. With
a formula that they found on ChatGPT, because they didn't have a long enough period of time to actually do the maths properly, get the proper economists in to calculate what the real trade barriers were. And look, we've seen the turmoil in the markets. It's been the biggest crash. I know it might be short term, but it has been the biggest crash in the markets for a very long time. We've seen 10% wiped off the S&P 500 in 3 days. So if you have a pension invested in the American stock market, or virtually any stock market in the world, it's not looking as good as it was last week. If you want to buy an iPhone, the cost of that could go up by 43%. If you want to buy all sorts of goods in American supermarkets in the next 6 months, what Donald Trump is doing is actually going to make life worse and more expensive for exactly the people he seeks to represent.
And they don't appreciate that at the moment.
No, because life's already unbelievably expensive for them.
I think they admire somebody who says, I'm going to do this, and he does it. We're used to politicians, particularly in this country, saying, well, we've got a plan and we're going to do this and we're going to introduce a legislation in 2030. What he says is, and he did it with the prisoners who he sent to Colombia. If you remember, literally, his first 2 or 3 days in office, he got a plane load and sent some serious criminals back to Colombia. And if you recall, the Colombian government sent them straight back. And he said, fine, I'll have them back, but you've got 50% on your coffee tariff from Monday.
Yeah.
They sent a plane and took them back again. So the point is, forgetting the legislation behind it or the lack of legislation, he's getting the job done. And I suppose most countries actually admire him for getting rid of people who don't really contribute positively to their country.
And there's absolutely...
and that's one of the really good things about him.
There is no doubt that he delivers on what he says he's going to do in terms of actions.
Yeah.
But if you look at the outcomes, are the outcomes going to be good for the American people? Now, some people might say, I don't care.
What
Life
outcomes?
Is so
There's short, medium, there's long term, and those three are different. So what outcomes are you talking about?
Well, in the short term, if you have any investment in the stock market, the outcome is negative. In the medium term, prices will go up for American people. They will. There is no doubt whatsoever that prices will go up.
Without question.
But how do you know that? Because one of the things with Donald Trump...
That's just how economics works.
Yeah, but one of the things with Donald Trump, he is currently, on the face of it, many would say, irrational, illogical and unpredictable. He would say... that is intentional because I'm behaving in this way as a negotiation tool. He wants people to think, I don't know what this guy is going to do next. I better not upset him too much. What he's doing with China now, talking about 100+% tariffs and things like that. He said he wanted to disrupt trade, make things different, shift the economic world order, to want of a better phrase, and really shake things up. He categorically believes that they have been victim to unfair trade practices and that the victims of this overall are, you know, your places like Detroit, your Rust Belts and the so on and so forth. He would argue, if he was sitting here now, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. 70 countries, apparently, according to the press secretary, on the phone, trying to negotiate, trying to sort things out.
It's a negotiating ploy, isn't it?
I
think he's scared the world. He wants to be the world number one. He's a businessman, and he's saying, this is what I'm going to do, and 70 countries have gone and said, listen, we want serious negotiation, let's talk business.
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
And that's what he does.
One thing it's all not. It is certainly not boring. There's never a dull moment with Donald Trump, and you all have very different opinions of him, and, you know, trying to even catch up and keep up with the constant, very quick-moving thing. It's not for the faint-hearted, is it, ladies and gents? What is your opinion? I'll tell you what's not for the faint-hearted as well. The absolutely state of some of the streets in Birmingham. Have you seen what's going on there? One of the MPs now asking for the army to be deployed. Your thoughts? Hi there, Michelle Dewbs Co, 7, Nick Freeman, Andy Williams alongside me. Lots of differing opinions, as you might expect, about Donald Trump. John says, Caroline Levitt, we've just been hearing from, is absolutely fabulous. Peter says, all I can say is God bless Donald Trump. Lots of you saying you wish that you had that energy, the American, the MAGA energy from the politicians in this country. Paula says, all of this is Trump's fault. That's what people will be saying for a very long time to come, she says, not least the Labour Party. Anyway, look, the situation in Birmingham, have you, well, you will have seen it, I don't know where you've been if you've missed it, absolute chaos in so many streets there. This has been going on for a very long time. I think it started in its infancy back as long as January. Now, apparently, you've got rats, some are saying the size of cats, some are saying the size of foxes, which I think might be a bit of an exaggeration, but whatever. One Birmingham MP now is saying that the army should essentially be deployed to clearing up the streets. What do you think?
Definitely not the army. I think it's Birmingham's problem. It's the council's problem. It stems from the fact that 150 workers have had their jobs basically cut unilaterally and the unions say they need their jobs, it's costing each of these people up to £8,000 a year.
Yeah.
And the unions say, no, we need them for safety. So there's obviously been it's been badly handled by the council. It's nothing to do with the army. That's not what our army's for. We need our army for much better things. I mean, if the rubbish has to be cleaned, my view is that we use community service orders and get actually as a punitive part of the sentence, get people who are serving these sentences actually to collect the litter.
Well, yeah, I'll explore that in a minute. I just want to, if you're listening on the radio, we're showing some of these scenes in Birmingham. And I'm sorry, but I actually think that some of the people there should be ashamed of themselves, because when you see not just household domestic rubbish, because that's, to some extent, is, you know, it's understandable. You're not getting your bins collected, so your bin bags are out there. When you start seeing people dumping their sofas, their unwanted suitcases, their furniture, I mean, come on, you've got to have a word with yourself and ask yourself what you're actually doing there. And
yes.
What do you think, Andy?
No, I agree. It's not the time, is it, really? I mean, if you've got a sofa you need getting rid of, maybe hold on to it until the crisis is over. No, I think what this shows is two things. Number one, all politics is local. And as much as we've just been talking about a stock market crash, and obviously that will affect some people, what for most people, it's having your bins collected on time, it's having potholes fixed, it's those small things that make a massive difference to people's lives. And we take it for granted that we don't have rubbish piling up in the streets.
But the residents are saying we're paying part of our council tax towards this. Well, and it's not happening. So if this doesn't sort itself out very soon, we're going to withhold it.
And much more council tax than they were paying a few years ago, because, as you'll remember, 18 months ago, Birmingham City Council effectively declared itself bankrupt because it had hugely mismanaged its budget over a number of years. And as a result, who's footing the bill?
Well, it's £793 million they owe for this equality payments.
Right, partly that, and then I think there was an IT system failure as well, or an overspend. So the people who are paying, they're bankrupt, and the people who are paying are the residents of Birmingham, whose council tax has gone up 20% in 2 years for their bins not to be collected.
For nothing.
But what would happen? I mean, if you...
We had it before, didn't we? We had this, I think, in the late 70s, 1979, the bit there was a
well,
problem
we had a winter of discontent, didn't we, where lots of things, I think, really were not great. But if someone then was to say, I'm just not going to pay my council tax, I'm not going to do it, aren't they on a sticky wicket legally?
I don't think they are. And I'm not suggesting that's what they do, but if there's an allocation of your council tax that goes towards bin collection and your bins are not being collected, there's a breach of contract, isn't there?
I don't know.
Yeah, I would say there is a breach of contract. You're paying for something, you're not getting it. Why are you paying for it? These guys, most of them are paying on direct debit. What I understand is they're saying we're going to cancel our direct debit so long as our bins aren't collected. Who could argue with that?
You might have a whole new cohort of people to defend in Birmingham, Nick.
Everyone flooding in. What about Sir David, one of the viewers at the top of the show? You're one of my first emails in, actually, thank you. He's saying about getting prisoners to do it, and I know you just briefly touched on that then. This whole notion that actually if someone's, I don't know, maybe you're in an open prison, you might be able to do certain elements of work. Where do you think we should be as a society in actually tapping into that and go, do you know what, there's an underutilised labour force there, let's get them out working?
I think a lot of people see prison as a soft touch. It's meant to be punitive and remedial. And I think a lot of people think they have a gym, they have television, they have this, they have that. Certainly, Category Cs have a very comfortable time. It's meant to be a punishment as well. Why can't we use that resource and make our society better and at the same time clean graffiti, collect litter? Because it's not done. Many councils now don't even bother cleaning the streets. So what is wrong with saying you've been punished for doing whatever crime you've committed, you've got a community service order, this is what you're going to... 100 hours, 150 hours of picking litter up. Subject to supervision and obviously safety outfits and the right equipment. I think that will be good for society, because society will think, actually, they are being punished and they're actually paying something back.
So get those people, perhaps not in prisons, but those people on community orders, and get those people deployed.
Particularly at a time when prison places are hard to come by because we haven't got the space and it costs so much money.
See, I think that is a very common-sense approach, and I don't know what the pushback... Have you got pushback to that? What is the pushback to that?
I think it's a tricky one. I
Why?
feel a little bit uncomfortable with that. I think, look, we do have community service orders in this country, and as you say, people are sent out for a number of hours to fulfil their sentence, to pick up litter and clean graffiti, and that's fine if that's the deal. But if you're given a custodial prison sentence and then it's sort of like, well, we've got some hard labour to be done, actually, could you just use that? Could you just do this for us? I don't I don't like the sort of shift in,
All right, so then
a sentence
stick
is a
with the
sentence.
community people then. So the community orders, that's what Nick's saying. So stick with that. Would you then be adverse then? If you've got that sentence, you've got that community service order, and that's your community service, picking up those bin bags, or not the surfers, I'll let you off with that bit, but the bin bags and stuff, and moving them on.
No, I mean, if that is similar to community service that currently exists, then I don't see a problem with that, as long as the sentence is applied in the correct way.
The problem at the moment is community service is a really soft option. It's not enforced properly. It literally, unfortunately, is nothing. And the public are generally aware of that, and they feel, well, they're committing a crime, they're getting a penalty, which is an alternative to custody, and it's not really being fulfilled properly because there isn't the resource there to actually manage it.
Well, there you go. That didn't take long. We fixed the problem in Birmingham. Who'd have thought it? Get the people on the community service orders, get them deployed there. You'd fix it in not too long a time, I think. If you've got, I don't know, you might know something that I don't, and you're sitting screaming at your screen saying, Michelle, you can't do that because of X, Y, Z. Tell me. Diane, she's got a completely different approach. She says, never mind all this talk about prisoners. It's the councillors, the local councillors, she says, that should be out there in the marigolds trying to fix it all. She says they are a part of this mess. I hear you. Anyway, look, after the break, this is an awful, awful story. We talk about broken Britain. Now, this story really highlights just how broken our country can be. 2 children have been convicted of manslaughter today after they killed an 80-year-old granddad in a completely unprovoked attack. Not only that, ladies and gents, the attack was encouraged, laughed at and filmed. What do we even say about this? I'll see you in 2. Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs. This is Dewbs Co with your tools. 7, Nick Freeman and Andy Williams remain alongside me. There's not a lot of support for that idea about getting the army out onto the streets of Birmingham. Keep your thoughts on that one coming in now. Look, we talk about the state of the nation very often on this programme. This story, I've followed it now since it occurred. Absolutely awful, horrendous story. It's a story, essentially, of a grandfather, a guy minding his own business, just walking his dog. He was only a few minutes away from home in Leicestershire. He then got set about. There was a gang of kids in the park. There was about 5 kids there or thereabouts. And what happened was that the boy, we're talking children here, we're talking teenagers. There was a boy and a girl involved in this. Both have now been convicted of manslaughter. They attacked this man. I'll spare you all the details because it is so upsetting, honestly, when you hear what they did. They really sought to humiliate him. They racially abused him. They kicked him. He was kicked repeatedly by this boy, said to be encouraged by the girl who was laughing and filming much of this attack. He obviously then went on to die. They've both been convicted of manslaughter, yet to be sentenced. The girl has been released on bail, which has raised a few eyebrows with a few people. This entire thing makes me so sad and highlights for me so many different strands of problems in society. Where are you on it, Nick?
I think it's a reflection of, well, are these children actually evil? But the boy said this act is evil. And he's sort of almost disconnecting himself with the depravity of his actions. And he said, I just needed to release my anger. So we live in a society which is fueled by the internet, by social media, which is full of hate and anger. And I have no idea what the background is for these children, and they are children, 12 and 15, the girl's now 13. Yeah. But where is the humanity? Whatever your background, what sort of person can go up to an innocent, lovely man and racially abuse him and basically beat him to death, kick him to death, while the girl laughs and films? I don't understand how that really works. I don't know how the children have been brought up, what the parents are doing, what the schools are, what type of people are these? So there are so many problems there. And the difficulty is, obviously, the girl's on bail.
What do you think to that? If you get convicted then of manslaughter, is that normal to be released on bail?
Well, manslaughter, it's not often that you have this age group convicted of manslaughter. It's not thankfully, commonplace. In relation to the boy, obviously he's not been sentenced yet, but the sentence will range from anything from 2 to 10 years. For the girl,
But that's not a lot.
It isn't a lot. He's not convicted of murder. He's not convicted of murder.
Yeah, but if you kicked a guy to... I mean, you imagine being there. You imagine this was your dad, your granddad, or you, I don't know how old you are. You're out walking your dog. You're just minding your own business. You might be sitting here now watching this, stroking your dog as it happens. You're at the end of your road in a park. You're minding your own business. You get set upon.
And you're a perfectly decent person as well. You've done nothing to anyone other than provide them with decency and compassion and et cetera, et cetera. So it is horrific.
Potential sentence is staggering, because then do you get released after half of that, there or thereabouts?
It depends on the discretion of how the child is doing. We don't even know whether the 12-year-old will be incarcerated, because she was peripherally involved, albeit she was convicted and it was a joint enterprise. So it will be fascinating to see how the judge deals with this.
It's awful, awful. Andy, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I hope they get the maximum possible sentence, because, to me, the fact that it's a manslaughter charge is a technicality. If you beat that severely an 80-year-old man with a shoe in a park and leave him afterwards, then what do you think's going to happen? I mean, it's
he actually boasted, didn't he, that he thought, I've either killed someone or seriously injured them. He told the rest of the gang that's what he did. Yeah. So he was boasting about it.
And that quote that you picked out from the boy is the bit that shocked me the most, where he said, I kind of just needed anger releasing. Yeah. I mean, how could you, even if that was true, and look, maybe that's
a reflection on his parenting, isn't it?
Well, and that's the interesting thing, because is it? It might be. And it might be that he hasn't been brought up in such a way as to deal with his emotions.
That's what
properly.
I mean.
It may well be.
That's
exactly but it also might be that, for all we know, the parents have brought him up brilliantly.
Well, he wrote a letter, Andy, and in this letter, which is the bit when you was referring to then, he says, I feel like my case is evil, I'm not that kind of person, I kind of just needed anger releasing. But then he went on and said, I feel like I've let my mum down so much. So his mum, obviously, if he feels like he's let his mum down, his mum obviously is not...
He doesn't say his dad, does he?
No, he doesn't say his dad. That is quite interesting. But I mean, how, as a parent as well, to know that you've created a child, a 12-year-old, and for me as well, I always think when it's a girl, I know people will say this is a wrong thing of me to say, but there's something about me that when I hear a girl being involved in these kind of... A 12-year-old girl thinking it's funny that an 80-year-old man is getting battered literally to within an inch of his life and then beyond, and thinks, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to film that.
Well,
I'm going to laugh.
Have we become so desensitised by... And I don't, it's too simplistic to say it's social media, but it must be a part of it, that people just film things on their phone. Anything. Yeah. Even a death-taking.
However horrific.
However horrific. For what purpose? For posterity? We're going to keep it on our phone and watch it back later. We're going to post it on TikTok. And it's just absolutely mind-blowing to me. I mean, it's awful.
Yeah.
Do you think that parents should have criminal responsibility?
I do.
Just briefly.
I
so
do.
If your kid does something like this, do you think you should be on some kind of charge as well, or not?
I think you should. I think you will have a defence because, as Andy said, you can bring your child up in the most perfect way and you can sometimes have just an evil child.
And what about naming these children?
Well, I think the 15-year-old should be named.
Yes, I agree.
But I don't think the 12-year-old should be.
Well, the judge
One,
is
because of her age, and two, not because she's a girl, but because her involvement was peripheral, albeit she's convicted, it's to a lesser extent.
Yeah, and she's 13 now, and the judge is going to be deciding whether or not he's going to release those names, so we'll watch this space. What do you make of it all? It's just terribly, terribly sad. My thoughts, of course, are with his family, who will live with this and are suffering massively at this moment in time. Look, Prince Harry, he is in court now saying that he wants us taxpayers to be paying for his security. Your thoughts? Hi there, Michelle Dewbs, till 7, Nick Freeman and Andy Williams alongside me. Lee says, Michelle, how about we give Birmingham Council a fixed penalty? I don't know, he says maybe it could be 30 quid for each bin bag on the streets. He said, because I can bet my bottom dollar, if the public were basically littering of their own volition, they would get a penalty. And it's not their fault, he says, that you can't get rid of your rubbish. One of my other viewers says, Vernon says, talking about litter in Birmingham is absolutely ridiculous. It's gone way beyond that. He says clearance now of this scale absolutely needs specialised vehicles, knowledge and operators. An emergency must be declared and the clearance workers have to be paid from whatever it takes, whatever cost, and money should be found from radical cuts in services. I don't know if you've seen the state of the council's finances in Birmingham, Vernon. They're not really looking that healthy. I'm not actually sure there's too much left to slash. Anyway, look, Prince Harry, he's back in court now. He's saying that he's been, long story short, he wants us taxpayers to pay for the protection that he and his family get here in the UK. He reckons he's been singled out for inferior treatment. You're a lawyer. What do you think?
I think he's the author of his own misfortune. He's monetized the royal brand. He's married Meghan, gone to live in America. He's resigned from royal duties. So I think that this is the price he pays. You can't have it both ways. But on the other hand, when he comes over here, I do think that there's a middle ground where the taxpayer, who will be extremely resentful for paying for him, because they say, why should we? He's not been particularly complimentary about the royal family. He's clearly made money out of those adverse comments. But I think the government could say, we will assess the risk and you pay for the security. And that might be some sort of hybrid ground which would satisfy the taxpayer and maybe satisfy him. But I think it's his fault, and on the face of it, he needs to pay for his own security. It's his issue because of the way he's behaved.
I broadly agree with Nick. I mean, my slight note of sympathy is that Prince Harry didn't ask to be born into this situation. He's had the spotlight on him his entire life, and that has implied, and I'm sure provoked, sort of risk. You know, he's not a normal person walking down the street who can do so anonymously. But, as you say, the key factor here is Prince Harry is now an independently wealthy man. He's made his own money, and he's made that money because he's Prince Harry. Not because he's the world's most talented individual, but because Netflix, for whatever reason, were willing to give him and his wife $100 million to create a bunch of shows that so far nobody's really taken to. Spotify have given them another $20 million. To me, that's $120 million that they can put towards their security, and I don't see why the British taxpayer should do so instead.
Yeah. Whenever I talk about these topics, and I've got to say, I don't tend to cover Prince Harry and Meghan very often. I just don't really. But when I do cover them, there's so much hate, and I mean, I can feel it. It comes in instantly. As soon as I mention his name, so many people, they do get in touch, absolutely despise the pair of them. Yeah. So if there's that level of hatred just coming through when we're talking about it, then that would back up the fact that he says, actually, potentially, I'm at risk.
Well, I think they see him as a traitor, don't they?
Yeah.
They see him as a traitor because whether you're a royalist or not, he could have gone away quietly and with dignity, but he specifically used the royal family to make millions and millions of dollars. So he can well afford his own security, and one would expect him to pay for it.
I actually think if he'd done that, if he'd gone to the States, what was it, 5 years ago, and led a quiet life, which, by the way, it wasn't as though he was hard up before he got the Netflix deal, right? He got 15 million, inherited 15 million, I think is right in saying. If I was him, I absolutely would have gone to Montecito, one of the most beautiful places in the world, and relaxed.
But you're not married to Meghan, are you?
Well, no, thank goodness.
I think that's a fly in the ointment.
I will never fathom how he was able to essentially, or they were able collectively, essentially, to call the royal family racist.
No, disgusting.
And just with no real evidence or proof, disgusting. Never really. I mean, I'll never forget that Oprah interview where they sat there and basically said this.
It was horrendous.
And instead of having journalistic integrity and pushing back and saying, whoa, that is like, what a claim. Yeah. Who did it? What are the details? How can you back this up? Instead, what we were met with was, oh, that sounds awful. And then all of the headlines rolling out about that. How would you actually cope if a member of your family publicly did that to you? You don't need to be royalty to think you'd be absolutely devastated and horrified about that. Speaking of horrified, so many of you are getting in touch about that awful killing of that grandfather. It's just a horrendous situation. That conversation about whether or not parents should be on the hook as well for their child's bad behaviour, I think that's an interesting one. I'll explore that in a bit more detail. Long story short, pretty much all of you are getting in touch and telling me that absolutely not do you think the army should be dragged in to deal with any of this situation on the streets of Birmingham. There's a lot of anger about this, I've got to say, that actually the councils are letting these kind of things unfold on the streets of Britain. Look, that's all I've got time for tonight. Thank you very much to my panel, and thank you to each and every one of you at home. I've enjoyed your company. As always, have a fantastic night, and I'll see you tomorrow night.